Perfect. All right, everyone. Good morning. It's October 8th, 2024, and we are at a meeting of the Audit Compliance and Governance meeting for the Connecticut Green Bank. Just a couple quick announcements. Mute your microphones. Feel free to use the chat box if you're not being heard, and we're going to record the meeting for the general public. So the first time you speak, if you can, it'd be great if you could state your first name. Right. So first we're going to go into call to order, and I'm happy to run that, but we have a call to order. Does that work?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. Any public comments? Anyone from the public comment here that would like to comment? Okay. Then I would request that we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our May 14th, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
All right, perfect. Those in favor say aye.
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 All right, those opposed say no. Excellent. And do we have Tom on, Matthew? Is there any other board members on? I apologize if I'm missing them.
Yeah,
Joanna's here.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, Joanna. Excellent. Thanks, Joanna. Perfect. All right. Forward. All right. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Jane and the accounting team, and they're going to go over our annual comprehensive financial report.
And actually, I'm going to turn it over to our auditors, PKF O'Connor Davies. We have Joe Santafonte here and Catherine Pontenot. And we're wrapping up our audit, and we have pulled together financial statements, and we have a draft here where they're going to present some highlights for us. Over to you.
All right, I'll get us started going over the highlights. This is Joe Santafonte from PKF O'Connor Davies. So next slide is just the kind of big picture agenda. I'm going to talk about some highlights, things that are different from last year. And then we'll talk about the specific highlights and financial information in the audit report. We'll provide required communications, and we'll talk about future considerations, new GASB statements that are coming up. So the highlights for 2024, the biggest change was the CEFI Solar Services purchased the remaining interest in Connecticut Solar Lease 2 and 3. And that, as a result of that, and then the criteria for discretely presented versus blended presentation changed. So they went from discrete to blended. So now, even though we had a total column for reporting entity, now they're actually part of the primary government versus this presentation that you see here. So basically, if you look at page 24 in the audit, it's the same presentation showing from discrete, those were went to zero, and then the net effect of the 9.458 million was added to the primary government's beginning net position. So next year, when you look at the financials, you'll basically have two columns. If you looked at the statement of net position, it's just two columns, just primary government last year, this year, and the operating statement this year shows this activity, but next year it will just be two columns. All right. So consistent with that presentation.
So that's kind of a reclass, right?
It's just a reclass as far as the being the total. It's just really a presentation change because the reporting entity, without the investor, that the Green Bank basically between the board and management, controls all of it. So it becomes blended versus discretely presented. I mean, you didn't 100% control it because of the investor. So yeah, big picture. The numbers don't change, just presentation. So consistent with that.
Jeff.
Sure. With that presentation, the tables tables 1 through 3 are going to be a little bit different, and then you can look at there's a note 1 that says this change happened. So that's why some of the data is not presented separately anymore for 24 and going forward for the discretely presented component units.
Is
Oh,
there,
and
is there any implications? I know you got the reporting right, Joe. I guess to the management team of this change and the adjustment to the financial statements moving forward, is there any implications managerial wise, regulatory wise, or anything we're not thinking of?
Not that I know of, regulatory wise, in terms of management, it now gives us access to the resources of those subsidiaries, so that we can pay off intercompany debt, and we could bring up cash to use for investments in CGB.
Right. Brian Farnan, is there any other, does this have any other implications for us though?
No, not really. No.
Okay. I mean, I know it's beyond the scope of the audit committee. I'm just thinking, you know, does a change like this flag anything for any other things we're not thinking of? That's all.
This is Birch Hunter, Tom, Chief Investment
Yeah.
Officer. I would just say
Yep.
I
know who you are, Bert.
No, that was for the benefit of others. Not you, my friend. So I would just say that what it does do is it gives us unfettered ability to manage the affairs of the portfolio in a way that probably benefits the Green Bank in the long haul, without having to concern ourselves with the investor member, where we would have to get consent or otherwise go to them for permission for certain things. The other thing that it does is it dramatically changes our the insurance stance, because U.S. Bank has had some very, very peculiar edge of, well, I'll save my editorial comment. They had some requirements that were unique to themselves, we believe, and were kind of difficult for us to kind of fit into our overall insurance program as we have for our other assets. So it kind of removes that ongoing concern about having to comply with those with a target that seemed to be moving annually and adversely to our other programs. So all for the good, Having said that, I would like to say for the record, U.S. Bank was an excellent partner, and we wouldn't have been able to have done those transactions in the portfolio without them, and we appreciate them as a partner.
Okay. Thank you. My apologies for interrupting, Joe.
Yep, no problem. All right. The next item, Public Act 22-25, cap the regional greenhouse gas units and proceeds for Green Bank at 5.2 million, with the excess being diverted to a different entity. So you'll see that on the financials as one of the discussion items we'll talk about in a minute. And there was no federal single audit this year since expenditures didn't hit the 750,000 threshold, which will be going up in a couple of years to $1 million. But all right, starting with the financial statements, as in prior years, you have a unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which of course is the goal, and no qualifications, scope limitations, or anything along those lines. That's on pages 8 through 10 in the draft. The total net position, just big picture, increased 24.7 million, and that's before the prior period, to the 166.1 million. And we'll talk about some of the drivers of that and the stuff we're going to talk about in the next few pages. Revenues, expenditures, net position. A lot of that is also detailed in the MD&A, but we're going to hit the highlights using the slides. The revenue trends on the next slide. Again, past 3 years, just showing where the revenue change was. So basically up to $500,000 this year. And on the next slide, some of the specifics of what drove that, because there were some items that were up and some items were down. So Again, the increase of $500,000, increase in interest on the promissory notes of 1.9 million, and that's just due to the increase in the balance of the program loans. The decrease in the greenhouse gas, as I mentioned, because you're capped at the 5.2 million, so there was a decrease of 3.9 million for that due to the cap. An increase in energy system sales of 1.6 million due to additional sales, and a small increase in the RECs for the non-truck RECs of 0.3 million. So I'm going to hand it off to Catherine to continue the discussion.
All right, so Catherine Patnod, partner with PKF O'Connor Davies, and I'll take over with the expense trends. Your operating expense history over the last 3 years to average $35.3 million. The 2023 was a large decrease in the incentives paid out. And if you go to the next slide, we'll take a look at some of the current year changes. Overall operating expenses increased by $5.8 million to $38 million. This was caused by an increase in the provision for loan losses of $0.8 million due to an increase in the reserves based on an increase in the loan portfolio amount. There was a decrease in grant and incentives of $0.8 million due to a decrease in the PBI and EPBB incentives that were paid out as those programs were closed to new systems. The increase in program administration cost of $2.4 million and in the general and administrative costs of $1.9 million. Those were both due to a $3.1 million increase in pension and OPEB expense, as well as a $1.2 million increase in salaries and benefits due to salary increases, as well as an increased headcount from 48 to 57 employees. There was also an increase in energy system cost of goods sold of $1.6 million that corresponds with the increase in the revenues. This was just due to additional sales of commercial PPA projects. On the next slide, you'll see your net position trends. Overall, you've shown an increase over the last 3 years, although it fluctuates between the categories. If you go to the next slide, we'll talk about what some of those changes were. Unrestricted net position increased by $28.8 million to $88.4 million, primarily due to the operating income of $26.4 million. Non-expendable restricted net position decreased by $57 million to 0 due to the buyout that Joe mentioned of the outside ownership by Sophia Solar Services in CTSL2 and Solar Lease 3. $45.9 million of this caused the majority of the $45.3 million increase to net investment in capital assets. So it just reclassified in there. The equity interest portion that was non-expendable in the prior years moved into unrestricted. So this was just the change in from First Star's investment into just Sophia Solar Services. And the net position restricted for energy programs increased $7.6 million, primarily due to increases in assets restricted for maintaining loan loss reserves. And this now includes the CT Solar Lease 2, what was previously reported as non-expendable. Now we'll take a look at some of our required communications with those charged with governance. Once the audit's issued, there will be a formal letter issued, but we just want to go over some of the highlights of that letter. We discuss estimates, the significant ones, which include the net pension and OPEB liabilities, the actuarial assumptions and proportionate share calculation, the allowance for uncollectible accounts, and the assumptions used in the asset retirement obligation calculation. We found that the disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. We'll be requesting management representations once the report is dated. We confirm that we are independent, and there is one past adjustment on Solar Lease 2. This is one that we've had the last couple years. This year it's $172,000 to remove a deferred financing fee and the related accumulated amortization. Management leaves these on the books for FASB reporting. Under GASB reporting, these aren't allowed to be deferred, but we passed on that adjustment as it was small enough, and the net amount of that is decreasing every year. Now we'll take a look at some future considerations based on new GASB standards that are out. GASB 101 on compensated absences will be effective next year for fiscal 2025. This requires that liabilities for compensated absences be recognized for leave that has not been used and for leave that has been used but not yet paid in cash or settled through non-cash means. So we'll be taking a look, and management will be taking a look at compensated absences for next year. Currently, you're already fully recording the vacation leave. Right now, the sick leave is currently calculated at the 25% payout on retirement. So management will need to take a look at this and consider if the leave will actually be used. So we do expect there will be some increase in the liability, but it may not be significant. And we'll also be hosting a webinar in November with more details on this that we'll make sure management gets an invite to.
Excellent. Thank you.
The next item is GASB 102, certain risk disclosures. This one just provides guidance on disclosures for risks related to a government's vulnerabilities due to certain concentrations or constraints. These may limit a government's ability to acquire resources or control spending. Management will need to assess this, but we're not expecting disclosures on this next year. And the last one is GASB 103 on the financial reporting model improvements. The largest thing in here that relates to Green Bank is that for proprietary funds, the statement just defined what non-operating revenues and expenses are. We're not expecting any significant changes, but it may change slightly some classifications on your fee. I think that's all we have. If there's any questions, we're happy to take them.
Hey, thank you, Catherine. It's Tom. If I'll defer to others, but if not, I do have a couple questions, comments. So first of all, you've had no problem with the way we're accounting for things at this point in the financial statements, correct?
Correct.
So I'm comfortable that our accounting processes are in good shape, and congratulations to the team for that. I know you worked hard on it. My question would be more so from a risk perspective, if you guys noticed anything in our operations or in the way we're doing things that increases our risk profile for loss, whether in our, our receivables or our potential for loss in other areas.
Well, I mean, we do look at the loss reserves, so I think any potential losses are those are being identified and calculated, so that the financials shouldn't be impacted when those losses occur. So I don't think we noticed anything else specifically that's a risk to your operations.
Yeah, Joe, and I wasn't implying that there were, but I was just wondering with all the different things that we're doing, right? If I know you're opining on the financial statements and saying that obviously the way we're calculating reserves for losses are, I believe, A, consistent with prior year, and B, reasonable for the financial statements presented as a whole. I'm just wondering whether there's something on the horizon we should be on the lookout for. I'm always cognizant of the fact that we're making decisions here sometimes on a case by case basis, and are we doing anything that's necessarily risky, or was anything noted as a difference from prior year? That's really where I'm kind of going. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think anything came to our attention. The asset retirement, all the risks. I think the accounting is correctly, but I have done correctly. I haven't. Nothing's comes to mind where that's a risky thing that you're doing, or there's more risk with that than with what you've been doing.
Bert, do you find anything that we're doing any riskier than what we've done in the past, or do you have any concerns on that front?
No, not from an overall portfolio point of view. I would say that there's balance. We look to contain exposures in credits to no more than $5 million, with the exception being for project-based credits that have strong offtake agreements, like in some of the fuel cell transactions that we have brought to the board. So, and we really don't hit that $5 million mark frequently. So for the most part, our portfolio is well diversified, and it has a lot of dispersion of risk. So I wouldn't say that we really and we're fortunate in that our funding source from the system benefit charge doesn't really give us a lot of liability cost risk. So we're well balanced in that regard, because a lot of the assets that we do put on our books are, in fact, most of the assets we put on our books are fixed rate, but we balance that off if we were to raise more capital in the future in the form of bonds to, say, fund out a portfolio, we would do that in consideration of the interest rate risks that we would see. So I think on the whole we're well balanced, and I think that our loss experience over the years has borne that out, and we keep a watchful eye on. We meet regularly in terms of looking at the payment ability of our customers, and we do that by portfolio, and we go through that on a monthly basis with the larger team from accounting, legal, investments, and financing programs. So I think we got a good system.
Bert, thanks for the answer. You said something there that triggered it, which was what I was saying is, historically we've done quite well. I just don't know if we've changed things where they have that. Anytime you go and invest in a mutual fund and stuff, they have past performances and a guarantor of future success, right?
That's right.
So so that's where I just want to make sure that we're remaining vigilant on managing our risk, and I'm sure we're accurately presenting it right now in the financial statements of the organization. But that was the reason for my question, is I just want to make sure we don't get over our skis on that, and that's been kind of consistent in what I've been wondering about. So
sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got nothing else on the financial statements yet.
All right, perfect. If there are no other kind of questions, comments, concerns, then I would ask for the committee to entertain the resolution on the slide.
Smet, so moved.
All right. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye. And I'll second it, Brian, for if you need it.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Tom. We'll put that in the minutes. Those opposed? Abstentions? All right, excellent. Thank you guys so much, and thank you to our outside auditors for all the work that you do over the last year and into the coming year. So thank you guys so much. All right,
Can I
Sure.
just ask a quick question before I do have to jump off here in a couple minutes, but Joe and Catherine, based on everything I've read, there's been no reportable conditions or anything like that relative to our accounting policies, processes, et cetera, and there's been no material adjustments to the financial statements. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm asking if those are accurate.
Yes, that's accurate.
accurate.
Yeah. And to the accounting team, great job. Thank you. Please express my appreciation to all the internal accounting team, and to you guys and your audit team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Okay. Brian, I don't believe two individuals. We have Matt and Joanna. I don't know if that actually keeps us with quorum to have. Do we need a third? I thought I could pull up the bylaws. I thought it was my understanding you had to have three.
I'm on, Brian.
Oh, perfect.
I can
All right,
stay
excellent.
on for 3-4 more minutes. Yeah.
All right, excellent. Okay. So real quickly, James, do you want to give a quick little legislative update?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. James DeSantos, Legislative Liaison. Just wanted to walk you through this very briefly. I have 2 slides. This is an adherence to the legislative process memo that was passed through the ACG committee and then the board of directors last year. It was in effect for the 2024 session. It requires a report out on legislative process updates and statutory reporting. Unfortunately, the scheduled meeting for this ACG in particular falls right in the middle of the 2024 session and 2025 session. So we are in a little bit of a lull. So I'll walk through this slide briefly, and then if Brian Farnan or Brian Garcia or Joanna Wozniak-Brown would like to make any comments before we go on to statutory reporting, please feel free to do so. So the upcoming 2025 legislative session begins January 8th. Ends June 4th at midnight. It is a long session. It's also a budget session. Being a long session, it allows any legislator to introduce any particular legislation that they want to. It doesn't need to go through the committee process. They can introduce it. A lot of them do get public hearings. So a lot of very left, very right ideas get tossed out and do have a public hearing. So it does provide for a very carnival-like atmosphere at the beginning of the legislative session. You've probably read a lot in the newspapers over the summer and into the fall about the outcry on the public benefits charge. There has been calls for a special session to be scheduled before the November elections. Definitively, that will not be occurring at all. A reference to a lame duck session was also made over the summer, which was made by Senator Looney. To have a special session or a lame duck session after the November election before January 8th, which would address climate change and resiliency measures. That is still to be seen on whether or not that is going to occur. So where we are now is last Friday, all executive branch agencies were required to submit proposals to OPM. They are now going through a 3 to 4 month policy and budget review. At this moment, nothing has been sent to the Green Bank that directly either affects the Green Bank directly or any of our missions. So we are awaiting anything to be sent to us, and then it'll be reviewed internally and then distributed throughout the organization. Green Bank will not be pushing any CGB originated proposals at this time. We will not be the direct lead on anything that originated from the Green Bank. We are focusing the majority of our efforts on the carryover of Senate Bill 11, which was introduced in the 2024 legislative session. It was a governor's bill. It was spearheaded by Joanna Wozniak-Brown. The bill is going to be expanded significantly. It creates resiliency improvement districts, improved flood mapping, plans of conservation development. And I know Joanna's on the call too. So at the end of the slide, if you'd like to say anything, please do. But it will be expanded, and there's been a lot of groundswell of support from the Connecticut Conference Municipality, COST, CIRCA, executive branch agencies are getting on board. We had the Climate Week last week where Lee Welton led a discussion with CIRCA and CCM where both entities were on the record openly supporting Senate Bill 11 and urging its passage. So that's a very good sign. In a continuation of those efforts, the Department of Insurance, Commissioner Mays has formed a advisory council of which Brian Garcia has been appointed to sit on. They're looking for recommendations to come out in 2025 for implementation in 2026. So Senate Bill 11 is essentially phase 1, and Commissioner Mays' Mitigation Advisory Council meeting will propose recommendations for phase 2. In terms of the legislative process, in working very well is the Connecticut Airport Authority brought a legislative proposal that they would like to introduce in the 2025 legislative session. We ran that through the internal process by distributing it to Chair Reed, Vice Chair Webster, to gain input, feedback, answer any questions, and determine a strategy to move forward. It does ask for an NRES expansion for virtual net metering, which would allow quasis to share in the same benefit that state agencies are currently allowed to do. We will be supporting it, but not openly, and we will advise the chairs of the Energy Committee that we will be supporting it. Now I could open this up to Farnan, Garcia, or Joanna if you'd like to make any comments on this slide.
I would just add that we really, when it's Senate Bill 11, we look forward to supporting the governor's office, OPM, and DEEP in this upcoming legislative session. That's all I would add. Sorry, Matt.
No, it's okay. Did Joanna want to comment? I had a question about the legislative process item at the end.
Yeah, thank you. I just would thank the Green Bank for participating in Connecticut's first Sustainability and Resiliency Week. And we had a fantastic attendance across our events, in person, hybrid, and virtual, and a variety of topics. And so we'll be sending out like a short little impact report, but I think that it helps us with some momentum and maintaining focus on these complex topics. So thank you.
Yeah, my only comment was on the airport authority. I'm just not sure what our stake as the Green Bank is in that, and so and not knowing that, I don't know why it's we're taking a position, but I would just urge. I see the airport authority in the news. I know there's always some, it's a political football type of entity, so just maybe be careful we don't run into any unintended, get crosswise with any of our other stakeholders if in supporting a bill like that, unless there's something really at stake for us. Just thinking back, we want to keep our peripheral vision on to make sure we're not jumping into something that has more than it meets the eye.
Well, I think the airport authority is really looking to us for guidance and help in development of that project. I think that would be kind of our stake in that. And we could have been cute and used the word NRES clarification. It is technically an expansion, but I don't think this is something that's really going to rock the boat with NRES. So it's really just to clarify that the airport authority, just like the state entities, can access NRES and will be involved in the development of that project.
Right. And to further that, I mean, Matt, the reason why it was sent to us was not only are we intimately involved with the NRES program, to Brian's point, but the language does apply to all quasis. So it's not just the airport authority. So it expands virtual net metering from state agencies to quasi-public agencies. So that's why it's in our court.
Okay. James, could you send us is there a bill number for it, an LCO number yet?
There is no bill number yet, but I do have a working draft, so I can send that around.
All right, great, thanks.
Joanna, you have a question?
Following up on Matt's comment, I think my only other thought might be that PURA, I think, is going to have to be redesigning those programs in short order. So I'm maybe just from a play perspective, and it depends on what the E&T chairs think as well, if it's better to try to propose those during the redevelopment of those programs instead of through a smaller piece and then have to tackle more pieces the following year.
The redevelopment of the program would be, PURA is supposed to report out by what, January of 2026, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so I think this gives the airport authority a brief little window to maximize the potential on all of their parking lots for solar canopies, is my guess. Before it's modified. But to your point, that makes perfect sense. But I'm sure they're just trying to kickstart it as soon as possible. Perhaps even take advantage of the SCEF program as well.
Okay, any other questions, points on the legislative process and the legislative agenda? And I would just add, this is going to be a long session, so there's definitely going to be a lot of things going to be out there. So just hey, take a deep breath, and it's gonna be a long ride.
Yeah, the following ACG committee meetings will probably have 8 to 10 slides, right? It's going to be a lot more once the session kicks off.
And we can maybe just do the statutory reporting quick. We call this the Matt Rinelli slide has helped us greatly since our early days. And we have been on time, and I thank James for his leadership here, ensuring that all of our notices have been and all of our filings are being done on time. And last session, we actually were able to get some clarifications on some filing responsibilities that were no longer applicable, but were still remaining in statute that James and the team, we were able to get cleaned up.
And if I can say great work to the staff, we just had a lot of reporting requirements and it's no small effort. And we've been on time now for years. We used to get dinged about it. So it's a lot of work in between reporting and, but that's what the statute requires. So great job for everybody who sees to these little details.
Yeah. Jane too. I should give Jane definitely a big role in that. All right, perfect. Let's let's move on to the Smarty energy savings methodology. And I believe Eric, you're going to take the lead here.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. This is just a quick update to our evaluation framework. As you all are aware, we bring our methodologies for ascribing impact to our activities to ACG for your review and approval. We haven't had a good methodology across the board for energy efficiency estimation in terms of how much energy is being saved, where we don't have a technical underwrite to point to like we do in CPACE. Smarty, being our flagship residential offering, we do a lot of energy efficiency financing. What we've been using are some estimates that we derived from the utility or from the EEB approved program savings document from 2011 when the program was launched. So these are quite stale and really need to be updated. Technology has come a long way in those 13 years. What we're proposing is to use the PSD, use estimates that are based on the PSD, the program savings document, on an annual basis that are developed by Eversource and UI, which they're using. It brings us in line with the utilities of what they're saying a window upgrade or a heat pump conversion would save in terms of energy, and it allows us to get ideally more accurate numbers. We reviewed the most recent program savings document and we benchmarked that against sources from the Department of Energy, NREL, and some other outside consultant work, and we find it to be very reasonable. So what I'm proposing to you right now is a much different from other methodologies is that, hey, we're just going to totally depend on the utilities and we're going to update our factors as they update their factors. Any questions?
Eric, for the resiliency ones, it looked like there wasn't a specific methodology identified, but I'd be happy to talk offline or work on that with the team.
You're on my list of people to chase on that. That's on our to-do list for this year. And just to be clear, what we're doing on for solar, we're using actual generation. This is just for the efficiency piece. In terms of estimates for impact, we have some ideas of how we want to kind of in what categories we want to talk about that impact, but I'd love to get your buy-in to and get your thoughts on making sure that we're headed in the right direction.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Do we still have a quorum for the resolution?
No, we need 3. So what we would do is just, I think we should move.
I can amend the resolution for the board and talked about this was reviewed at ACG.
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
All right. Employee handbook revisions. I believe this is Eric and Joe.
Sure. Joe, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Buonanata, Associate Director of Operations. So we have a few handbook revisions. So you may have noticed in the mailing, there's both a red line and a clean version of our employee handbook. We're presenting a number of updates to this committee, as well as later this morning presenting 2 new policies related to parental leave and telecommuting to the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee. So you'll, if approved, you'll learn more about those at the upcoming board meeting. But for purposes of our conversation this morning, we're presenting 3 edits and clarifications to the employee handbook. The first is a minor just swap out of a link in our handbook to our employee assistance program. We use Yukon Health as our EAP provider, and so we're just looking to update that to the appropriate website. The second update is just clarifying our policy around Microsoft Teams, which is our primary phone and internal chat application. This is just clarifying for employees that while during business hours, they should remain logged into and available via Teams. And then the third revision or clarification rather is to our ethical conduct policy. So as written right now, the policy states that employees and members of their immediate families are prohibited from investing in companies that receive financial assistance from the Green Bank. We're adding in some clarifying language that this provision does not apply to publicly traded companies. And just continuing, obviously, the process of disclosing any of this information, but adding some clarifying language around that. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Sarah Ferrari for discussion of our new artificial intelligence policy.
Has that last policy change been run by the state ethics? I mean, is that okay to invest in companies if they're publicly traded and as long as it's disclosed? Have we run that to ground?
We have not. I think part of the reason was when I actually got this bubbled up through an HR kind of onboarding process about someone with their, I'm not even aware of what publicly traded companies we are actually investing in. I mean, the concern would potentially be if there was some type of insider, well, I guess it would be fuel cell energy would be the one, right? At the current time. So we have not. I guess we could potentially try to clarify that. I mean, getting into things like insider training and things like that, or I don't know. I mean, we could also. I'd be happy to pull it because the list of companies that we are investing in is very limited from a public trading perspective.
Yeah, I think we should have a opinion, or I mean, they're always saying to us, call us if you have a question. It seems like before we make a change like this, we should make sure we're not, putting our own employees at risk of an ethical violation unknowingly.
Yep. Okay. And I don't know if Burr or Brian, I mean, FCE is the only publicly traded company that I'm aware of or can think of that we're actively engaged in, but you could see potentially that changing over time. Like, for example, we have a tour today, a fuel cell tour today, right? That's with the former UTC company. Maybe there's an opportunity that who knows. But yeah, we can do that. We can take that back.
All right.
Yeah, well, we can go on to the next slide then, and I'll turn it over to Sarah Ferrari for the AI policy.
Good morning. So I co-chair the AI committee at the Green Bank with Caleb Smith, and we are starting to use AI as an organization and think through what the implications are. As our understanding of this technology and its use is evolving, we thought that now is the right time to put information into the handbook about how we should approach using AI while continuing to give us the flexibility to have sort of like a non-handbook based review program and process. Public Act 2316 passed last year, and OPM and DAS are in the process of developing their own understanding for state agencies around AI. Our handbook policy cites directly to that public act to define AI and pulls out 4 key guiding principles that we recommend for how Green Bank staff should use this technology. The first is that it should be a purposeful use. That is, that it aligns with our mission and our vision statement. It is in line with how we understand the Green Bank to work, and in doing so, does not unfairly discriminate in any way against individuals or communities. There's a lot of discussion right now in the news around accuracy of AI, and so we thought that it was a core tenet that Green Bank employees that are using AI be responsible for ascertaining the accuracy of any information that's generated from it. We are not relying on AI to generate accurate information, and no information that's being used should be sort of shared publicly without a high level of review. Third, we're developing an oversight process and procedure that basically, depending on the riskiness of the AI tool and the application, goes through different levels of staff review, sort of similar to how we execute contracts now. If it's something that, at this point we deem incredibly risky, it's going to go all the way to the top for review. But we think that our understanding of AI and the risk that it presents will change with time. And so for that reason, we're not cementing the AI review process in this policy. And then the final one is privacy. So making sure that we are not using any non-publicly available data in AI procedures. And that if we are using any proprietary information that the Green Bank has, that is being approved through an internal review process. So in total, our hope is that this policy sort of enables the Green Bank to continue to explore how to use this technology to improve the services that we're able to provide, while still providing some guide rails around how we can continue to do this in a responsible fashion. That's what I got.
This is Matt. I'm thank everyone for their work on this. I feel bad coming in at a sort of after the fact and not knowing all the details that were reviewed, but I really can't support this policy the way it's written. I just think it does identify a lot of the risks, but I don't think the language mitigates those risks in my view. And I just think it's overly broad. I think, this is certainly a technology that will add value, but it doesn't add value, across the board. I think we need more of a designed use case of situations where it would be applicable to maybe fixed data sets, et cetera, where we have project-based and with managerial oversight. But to just turn it loose with these guardrails, I just don't think they're enough. I mean, most people aren't trained in how to use it. I mean, yes, we acknowledge there's biases built in and fallacies that are stated as if they're accurate, but putting that in the book doesn't help employees who aren't trained in the use of it. It's a very powerful tool, so I just think this is probably getting out, for me, a little further over our skis than I'm comfortable in terms of introducing it. So I would be more comfortable with something that's much more scaled back and defined and has, direct, manager level oversight on a project basis before we open the door wider. That's just my input.
Thanks, Matt. This policy is structured so that to use it, you do need to go through a review process. But that review process, we didn't feel like now is the right time to solidify it in the handbook because we think it will continue to evolve. But I'm curious, does that change your perspective on it?
Well, yeah, no, not really. I mean, I think it's actually early on is when to have the more restrictive, because I just think well, to my reading again, and I apologize because I know there's a lot of work that goes into getting it to this point. It just seems to be written in a way that is not clearly defined what that review process is and what level of review and all the other things that go with it, and what are the criteria for the types of instances where it would be used. The Green Bank, I think, again, we are a clearinghouse of information. We're a thought leader. We're clearly looked to throughout the industry. And our work product is important, and the things it says are important. And frankly, our staff is, better than any staff at producing it. So I just, I don't want to have it AI. I would be reluctant to have AI sort of brought in, maybe where it's not needed. I think we just need to decide, where is it useful? Where does it, what's the business case for it? Is it in reviewing our solar lease 2 data or something like that, where it can really help us perceive things that might not otherwise be perceived? But sort of broadly introducing it, I think, is premature, especially that a lot of these LLM models are so different. And, we don't know how they're trained. I just think there's a lot of pitfalls that need more governance early, and then as we get familiar and people get trained on it, then I think you can get more liberal use of it.
So Matt, one of my struggles on this is AI and machine learning is such a evolving, fast changing pace. So and it's hard to put a policy on a moving target. Like this, the shipment, do you know, for example, have an AI policy? Because one of the questions I had back to the team was like, is it time to put in a policy yet? Do we really need a policy? And I know there's a lot of work into it. So I didn't, and Sarah's done an amazing, very thoughtful job. So that's been my internal struggle.
It's an amazing job. And yeah, so I, again, completely appreciate the work. And I think it's a important starting point and important discussion. So I don't want to be the naysayer, but yes, Shipman does have a policy. It's kind of more in line with what I'm describing. And that's a little bit of my bias, if you will, to be cautious on it. But, I certainly don't pretend to be an expert on AI. I just think, our work product is very important. We're not just any other entity. And, while I definitely think this is a great and powerful tool, we've all seen it already has its risks, and I just want to make sure we're thoughtful about it. And again, that's the wrong word, because this is obviously thoughtful. My preference would be to have a much more limited scope of use with direct oversight until we have some examples of where and how it can benefit us.
Matt, this is Lee Welpton. Curious from Shipman's policy, if you have examples of where it's more permissive versus more restrictive. I'm trying to think about how I've seen AI in operation within the Green Bank so far, and curious how you're thinking about that kind of restrictive, the balance between using the technology appropriately versus being restrictive to the oversight that you're describing.
Well, I'd be happy to have that conversation offline. Let me just say, anytime, but it's our internal policy.
Yeah, got it.
Can you share that policy with Sarah and the team, and then maybe take it as a follow-up action?
I don't know, Brian, the answer to that. I'll have to ask our practice oversight committee what the standard is for that.
Okay, no, that's fine.
But it might be a good idea to collect it from other businesses, and I don't know how much literature review we did on this, but and obviously the Public Act has a task force in part for just this reason. So that might, I'm sure a literature review and publicly available policies might, if we haven't already done that, be a good.
Well, and Sarah and the team has reviewed the kind of like the state's policy, and there's been communications and calls on that. And I think we're just as much and I think the state statute that was passed, I think, I don't know how much that added to the overall understanding of where we need to go as a, so I don't know. I think it's, you know.
Brian, if I could,
Sure.
I could chime in. Yeah, we did do a substantial literature review. We reached out to other financial institutions, other quasi-publics, and other state agencies that we work with regularly to understand where they are at on this. And I will say none of them have a policy either. They didn't think that it was appropriate to put restrictions on it or to support it in any way in writing quite yet. The closest we got was the OPM document that Brian referenced and that ours is based on. So right now, it's my perspective that we are in line with the state as far as how we're approaching this issue.
Thanks, Sarah. I was trying not to put it so bluntly, but I think you kind of have to. I think that's about
Well, yeah, I don't want to derail the process. I mean, certainly you can move it along, but that's my view on it. I won't belabor it.
Yeah, Brian, I'm fine with going back and continuing to noodle on this in the AI committee if you don't think now's the appropriate time to pass this. So,
the other thing I was going to suggest is to your point, Matt, why don't we talk offline and figure out a way to enhance this by including the review process in the policy now, and then we can evolve the policy as our experience and technology evolve as well. So we can take it back, and why don't we do that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk offline. Again, I apologize for not being involved earlier. I know it sounds like a lot of work was done. So I'd be happy to share my input, and you guys can, take what's appropriate from that.
Thanks, Matt.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah, no, this is very helpful. I mean, sometimes, this is what I always love about you, Matt, is you kick the tires and it's going to end up with a better product. So, no, thanks for the insight. All right. So we did do a governance review of our bylaws, operating procedures, and we do this on an annual basis. We did not have any changes. We have made minor tweaks in the past few years when we do this annual review, just to fresh eyes on it. No major items there. Other things I wanted to point out is our boards. We've had a fair amount of change in our board makeup, and really excited to have Joe DiNicola join from Deep. He's got a finance background. He's worked with Bert in the past. They have a great working relationship, and he's a deputy commissioner, which I always feel is helpful. We are losing Rob Hodling as he transitions to a new job, and we're going to get that DECD position filled momentarily. And many of you were aware and may even potentially attend. Bettina retired. We're going to miss Bettina, but we're excited to have Kim Moores from the Treasurer's Office come in and take her place. So those are the three areas of transition since our last meeting. And we're currently working on the Laura Hoydick replacement. We do have one candidate in particular that we are excited about, but we can't get them to bite. Matt, you actually know this candidate, and we can talk about that offline. Maybe you can help us talk him into it. And if you want a hint, he's great with bonds.
Yeah, I'll work the refs.
All right, perfect. All right. With that, I think we don't need a motion to adjourn since we don't have quorum, but I would thank all of our committee members for their active engagement and work, and we'll see you all soon at the next board meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Joanna. All right. Hey, Bri.